Okay, my science friends, a little bit earlier in the year, we started talking about temperature. And now that we're talking about weather in science, I thought it would be a good idea to follow up a little bit and talk more about temperature and how we measure it. So, why is temperature important? There are many reasons, actually, but just a few of them. One is that we use it to understand weather. If we know the temperature, we can predict the weather. We know what kind of weather patterns we'll have. It helps us understand how to dress. If somebody tells us that it's going to be 98 degrees outside Fahrenheit, we'll know not to wear a jacket that day. Okay, so that's very important. We use it to check our health. Every time you go to the doctor when you're not feeling well, they will check your temperature. Okay, if it's too high, they'll know you might have a fever, you might be sick. Okay, so body temperature is such an important thing, something that we need to know about all the time. And believe it or not, we use temperature to cook. That's right. Ask someone in your house who does the cooking. When they put some food in the oven, they have to adjust the temperature. They might say, oh, we have to cook this at 300 degrees or something like that. Okay, so it's very important. So this, as you know, is a thermometer, and most thermometers have two sides, two different ways of measuring temperature. On the one side, we have Fahrenheit. It's kind of a funny name, isn't it? I'm going to tell you about it in a moment. But Fahrenheit is what we use here in this country. On the other side, we have Celsius. So Fahrenheit is a scale of temperature used in the United States and very few other places. In fact, I think the only other places that still use it besides the United States are a place called the Cayman Islands and a country in Africa called Liberia. That's it. Now, I'm still reading on the left side. On the Fahrenheit scale, water freezes at 32 degrees and boils at 212 degrees. So, when we hit 32, which is right around here, water becomes a solid. And we've already talked about that. It freezes. When water reaches 212 degrees, which is not even on this thermometer, it begins to boil. Okay, so that's Fahrenheit. Now, on the other side, we have Celsius, a scale of temperature used in most countries. On the Celsius scale, water freezes at 0 degrees. Okay, so that's pretty easy to understand, right? At 0 degrees, water is ice. And at 100 degrees, and it's not on here, it boils. Now, Celsius is also called the centigrade scale. Centi, as we've said before, means 100. So if you have 100 cents, you actually have a dollar. If you ever watch a movie that has a centurion is a soldier in a group of 100. Okay? And we're going to learn about centimeters later on in the year. And grade just means score or number or steps. Okay, so 0 to 100, that's the centigrade scale, the Celsius scale. Okay, now you might be wondering, who came up with these names, Fahrenheit and Celsius? Well, I'm glad you asked. The guy that you see on the left here, he looks pretty old, right? And actually, neither one of them is alive any longer. The guy on the left looks kind of serious. I can almost imagine he speaks like, many years ago, I lived in Germany, which is true. He lived in Germany. His name is Daniel Fahrenheit. Believe it or not, that's his last name. And he's from a country called Germany. And he created the Fahrenheit temperature scale. So the guy on the right, you want to take a guess as to what his last name is? Yes, It's Celsius. His first name is Anders Celsius, and he was from Sweden, which isn't that far away from Germany. And he came along and he thought he created a better way of measuring temperature. So there you go, Fahrenheit and Celsius. They are names of temperature scales, but they're also named after the people who invented them. And that's why when we look at a thermometer, we use a capital F and a capital C, okay? Because these are actually from names. So I've told you before that the stuff in the thermometer, that red stuff, is actually mercury. And you can see mercury being played with here. Now, this is not a toy. Mercury is super dangerous. You should never, ever, ever touch it. Fortunately, it's almost impossible for you to find some. And mercury has a nickname. It's called Quicksilver. And you can kind of tell why by watching this. Mercury is a metal that is also a liquid. Isn't that weird? So, not that you can bounce it around, but you can roll it and you can see it'll break off into little droplets. Okay? So, mercury is very interesting. The reason they use it in a thermometer, and they're trying not to do that so much anymore, but the reason they use it is that mercury, as soon as it gets warm, it expands, it gets bigger, and it goes up in that glass tube they have it in. Okay, so mercury is a really good way to measure any changes in the temperature. Okay, now you might be wondering, hey, isn't there a planet named Mercury? There is, and we'll talk about that really soon. Okay, let's say goodbye to Mercury and Quicksilver and Celsius and Fahrenheit. We will be using a thermometer really soon, okay? So keep your weather log ready and we'll have some fun measuring the temperature. Goodbye for now. The end.